Hello, my name is Frank, and I'm here at the Gwinnett Historical Courthouse, as you can see in the background. And tonight we will have a special speaker at the monthly Historical Society meeting of Gwinnett County. Tonight's topic will be Native Americans. And the gentleman's name that will be talking to us is Bill York. He's a World War II Navy veteran. He's a retired Atlanta furrier. He has hosted wilderness documentations for Georgia Pacific Television and written articles for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, as well as weekly columns for Stone Mountain Patch. York has been involved in the Gwinnett Senior Olympics, winning 27 medals over 10 years in golf, tennis, table tennis, and archery. The author of 6 books with a primary focus on Native Americans. York has lived on Indian reservations in Canada, the Dakotas, and the Pacific Northwest. So I hope you enjoy his talk tonight. It should be very interesting. Have a good day.
Call me to order. Michael Jones should be March 21st, 2011. Spencer, come up and do the petition.
Would you please stand and assume a prayerful attitude? Let us pray. Holy Spirit, thank you for this opportunity of fellowship with friends and family. Thank you for your warm sunshine and blooming plants, spring, rebirth of nature. Lord, help us to renew our energies as we seek to maintain our heritage. Bless our efforts, Lord. Guide us safely home at meeting's end. In thy holy name, amen. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
I'm planning on it.
Okay, get ready.
Oh, there's $5 minutes for. That's your speaker speak. But anyway, I copied it all a while ago. And our speaker tonight is a 78-year-old Navy veteran of World War II. The author's love of the wilderness has been an asset to his writings. He lived for 2 weeks on a pre-reservation in Manitoba, hunting seal and bear from a dog sled using harpoons, bows, and arrows. The author has devoted a decade researching the people that nurtured this land for 10,000 years before the arrival of the Europeans. He has hosted many wilderness documentaries for Georgia Public Television. He's canoed major rivers in North America and recently lived a month in a teepee on the Nez Perce Reservation in Idaho, researching the origin of lore and legends with Nez Perce elders, one over 100 years old. He's active in sports, having won gold medals in archery, tennis, table tennis, and golf in the Georgia Senior Golden Olympics over the past 3 years. He's a member of the Georgia Writers Association, ALTA, USTA, USTTA, Stone Mountain, Georgia Historical Society, and United States LST Association. He's lived 30 years in Stone Mountain with his wife, Dot. Would you please welcome Bill York?
My granddaddy used to have me calling the hawks on the farm, so I developed a loud voice when I was young. And I sometimes don't even need a microphone. I appreciate the fact that I'm 74 years old. That was 9 years ago that book was published. I'll be 85 next month. My interest in Indians started when I was a kid on the farm in Indiana. We lived about 8 miles out of a small community. And when we got the manure cleaned out of the stalls, plowing done, mowing done, the hay up in the loft, my granddaddy would let my brother and me take a couple of old horses. And we would go out into the woods, which was about 1,000 acres of forest primeval. And we would live off the land. We would live up as the Indians did. We bought a couple of 22 Springfield rifles, single shot. Today I don't know what they cost, but we paid $2.99 for them at the Montgomery Court Capitol when we were kids, and we got that out of picking blackberries and shooting squirrels and cleaning them and selling them to teachers and doing anything to survive during the Depression. Down in the woods south of the farm, there were some Indian mounds. In conversation with people that had been around there a long time, they were Potawatomi Indians. Indiana had as many Indians in it under different names, different tribal names, as Georgia had, and Georgia had a whole bunch down there. My brother and I used to sleep near those Indian mounds. We felt an affinity. We never desecrated them, we respected them. But we always figured there was some gold buried in them, something we'd be of interest in, but we never bothered. The war came on, and my brother went into the 101st Airborne Division and subsequently killed in Bastogne in 1944. He was a couple of years older than me, and when I had the opportunity, I enlisted in the Navy in 1943, and I spent a little over 2.5 years in the Mediterranean during a comparable period of time. When I got back from overseas, I had an obsession of finding out about the Indians and the burial grounds in the mounds that were down on the farm. But my granddaddy had died, and the farm had been sold, and the guy who bought it wanted a big pasture on it. So he clear-cut it all, blew up the stumps, and plowed the place, and had no consideration for the mounds. And without a mark of some kind, identity, I had no idea where they were. But I still had the interest, and my interest has remained very strong ever since. When I was in business, I got the chance to go to Canada on numerous occasions during the summer. I was in the fur business for 50-some years, and there isn't much fur business in June, July, and August. So you can take some time off and go do some of the things that you want to do. And I canoed a lot of rivers up there. I made a lot of videos for Georgia Public Television. And in the process, I met a lot of Indians in Canada. The Cree Indians, the Chippewas, who used to be in this country but had moved to Canada, the Assiniboine, the Inuits, and I developed friendship with a lot of them. I like them and they like me, and I'll give you just a couple of instances that occurred. There is a lake in northern Manitoba. Actually, it's in Nunavut. It's as far north as you can go in Canada. It used to be part of the Northwest Territory. And there is a lake up there called Lake Benjamin. Some guy built a lodge there. It's Canadian. And he was down here doing the show, and I was with the Safari Club at the time. And he invited me to come up and fish that lake. He said it's full of northern pike. And that's one of the great fishes fish in Canada. So at his cost, I flew up. I spent 2 weeks there fishing. The first week I was with a Canadian guide. Bless his heart, he hadn't been there very long. He didn't know what he was doing. Being in the Navy, I could find out where I was a lot quicker than he could. Plus, I was a better fisherman. So I went to the guy and I said, I'm not having a good time. I'm not catching anything. He got lost once. I thought we wouldn't find our way back to the camp. And he said, I've got a guy tomorrow. His group is leaving. I'll give him to you. And he's the best in the world. So he gave me this guy. He was a Cree Indian. He had been adopted by Canadians in Winnipeg. He was educated by the Canadians. You have the idea, the concept of what Indians are portrayed by Hollywood and various other places. But I fished with this guy for 3 weeks. We canoed the Wolverine River as far as we could go north, and we caught hundreds through a certain lure up into a bunch of weeds and looked like a submarine coming up from the weed bed. You could see the weight. 51 inches long, big mama, and I caught her. 3 days later, on the way back down the river, he said, "How would you like to catch big mama again?" I said, "She won't bite again, because I think I probably hurt her with that lure." He said, "No, she forgot all about it." We went back into the same bay, I threw the same lure into the same spot, and caught big mama the second time. 4 days later. At night, with him, camped out, I respected his ability to talk. He talked about a lot of things. He was well educated. I found out he was a doctor. But 2 months out of the year, he didn't want to be a doctor in a concentrated city of people. He wanted to get back the way that they lived years ago. So he'd go to the reservation, and he would stay there, and he would guide for people like me who came in. Welcome. Dr. Ghanem. Nice to see you. If you ever have a problem with your thoracic surgery, you need the best doctor in the land. Good to see you. I digress there for a moment. He and I fished all that period of time, and on the night of the 10th, we decided there was something we wanted to do. And he said, "How about chess?" Well, I figured the Indians couldn't play chess. I'm a good chess player, so I'll beat him. I never did that. I lost 3 games to him. One of the most well-educated people I've ever met. He was a physician. Regular medicine in 2 places. One is in Winnipeg and one is in Thompson, Manitoba. 2 months he went back to the old ways. That kept me interested in Native Americans. And then I had an Indian, a Sioux Indian, who was aboard ship with me in the Mediterranean, and he was one of the most dependable people that I've ever met. So I developed an interest in Indians, and I have had it ever since. How many people have seen one of these? This is a dream catcher. These were part of the culture of the Comanche and the Pima and the Navajo Indians in the Southwest. And what they did was to hang this, if they were Plains Indians, they hung it in the teepee. And if they were not Plains, then they put it in their hogans or in their adobe huts. But the purpose of it was to catch the bad dreams. Only good dreams were allowed through. I have one of these on my back porch. It's a little too far, so it's not working well, so I won't put it up in my bedroom. Something bad will still come through. But I'm going to give this to somebody here tonight. The subject I'm talking about is not taught in schools to any degree at all, I've discovered. Most everybody, unless they've studied the subject, have no idea how many Indians were here, where did they go, where were they located, what did they do, how did they live. And I've spent now, 10 years from now, I was 77, so that's now 18 years. I'd like to have everybody make a guess who wants to of how many indigenous people lived north of the Rio Grande before Columbus was ever born. Say 500,000 years before. Not the Incas in Mexico, not the Aztecs, not the Calmecs, none of those, not the Incas in Peru, none in South America or Central America. Just the Rio Grande North, including Canada.
Hundreds.
Yes, sir.
2 million.
2 million. How many? 6 million. I have a bidding war here. 100,000. 200? 5 million. 100 million. 10 million? 5,000? Yeah, I have to depend on one of the major encyclopedias for my information because I really don't know. I know there was an awful lot of them. But major Encyclopedia Britannica says that there were 17 to 19 million indigenous people living north of the Rio Rio Grande, including Alaska and the rest of the part of North America. So you had 10 million? I think you were the closest. So have good dreams. You've been having some nightmares. You have it in the proximity of where you're sleeping. The Indians used it that way. They put it at the entranceway of their hogan, their adobe building, or the caves, in this instance, the cave dwellers. And the Comanches were plains, so they had teepees covered with fur or tulle, and they put it at the entranceway of their teepee. And they believed that it worked. I don't want to test it whether it does or doesn't. But it's kind of interesting. A lot of people have them, and it's an interesting subject when it comes to Native Americans. Where did the 19 million come from? How long did it take? Well, the 2 ways they got here, we know. There was a guy by the name of Thor Heyerdahl, who was a Norwegian, who built a vessel called the Kon-Tiki. And he sailed it from the island of Fiji in the South Pacific and landed in what is now Peru in South America. He sailed that all that way, which proved that people could have come from the Polynesian areas of the South Pacific and arrived either in South America or North America. It's the way the Polynesians ended up in Hawaii, by boat. No other way to get there. And yet they populated those islands 12, 14,000 years ago. As far as the United States is concerned, and Canada, because of artifacts that have been dug up and carbon dated, it's been determined that things that were as much as 14,000 years old were found along the Canadian coast and in Alaska that belong to Native Americans, indigenous people who came here from the Orient. Most of them originally from China, and maybe from China to Japan, the islands, maybe uninhabited at that time, we don't know. We do know that new people came there 14,000 years ago, approximately. The Japanese current, let me back up. We had an ice age that started 30,000 years ago. It extended down to northern Indiana and over in Europe, even into Germany, France, that was the ice age. It was like a cap on the top from the Arctic Circle down to that area completely around the world. And it was solid ice. So there were no animals there were no people there, ever. 9,000 years ago, the ice age began to recede. It began to melt. And it began to recede northward, Indiana and Michigan, up into lower Canada, and it shrank and it got there. And as it did that, we back up a little bit. The Indians came from the Orient primarily across the Bering Sea. It was a land bridge. Back in those days, this was solid land here. So they came from this area. And the reason they came is because they had depleted the population of animals. The mammoths were gone, the saber-toothed tigers were gone. They had killed them, and then the population of the people began to grow, so they had to go looking for something to eat. And we didn't have McDonald's back in those days, so they had to go out and find it and catch it. So they began to seek in this area. They found polar bears up in this area. That was another source of food supply. They found quails, seals. So they kept moving, and they could do it 2 ways, either by boat, by dugout canoe, or they could do it over land. The Japanese current still flows in this manner across the northern Pacific. And it kept this area, Canada, Alaska, and the United States warm, to the degree of about 100 miles in from the Pacific Ocean. So they could walk, and they did. And they were hunters and gatherers, and there were people like the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons in Europe. They indication that we know of is a tribe of Indians that live where Portland, Oregon is right now. It's the confluence of the Willamette River and the Hudson, the Columbia River, where they come together. The tribe was known as Malala Indians, and we have indications from carbon dating that they lived there 14,000 years ago. At that time, the Ice Age was down in here. So they couldn't come in farther this way because of the ice, but they could continue coming down the coast, and they did. And we assume, along with what Adderall discovered coming across here, they moved all down into Mexico, down to Central America, down into South America. And Encyclopedia Britannica estimates that there were as many Indians in South America and Central America as there were in Canada and the United States. So that's another 17 to 19 million. So that's 38 million indigenous people that live in this country 10,000 years ago. The longer they live here, the more they proliferate, they repopulate, continue to populate the land. And so there became more of them. When the Ice Age began to recede from this area, they had already moved over into here. How do we know that? There was a spear point called the Clovis spear. It was unusual.